Today we're going to teach you guys how to build a banister. We're going to install these paint grade balusters, a newel post, some false end caps on the stairs, miter a skirt, put up some handrails, put some skirt boards in. The first thing you do whenever you're working on a stair system is identify the slope of the stairs. I'm going to show you guys how to quickly do that. You'll take a level or a board, anything, and lay it over the noses of the stairs. You'll take a speed square and set it right to where your corner right here touches. Then you'll take a torpedo level. Whoop, there we go. Torpedo level and set it on there. You'll make the bubble exactly level, and then you will look at the degrees, and it looks like we are dealing with a 35, 36, 37, a 37.5 degree angle set of stairs. So what I do is take that, write it down, 37.5, so that I can forever remember it while we work on the stair system. The next thing, after we know the angle, we're going to put the first skirt board in. So take your speed square, you put it even with the end of the nose of the stair, and for 1 by 12 material, I go 6 inches above. I'll make a mark at 6 inches. We'll come up to the very top, do the same thing. Then at that point, we're able to stretch a chalk line, snap it, go from there. Down here at the bottom of the skirt board, I've got a piece of the baseboard we're using for the home that we're going to use as a reference. What we want to do is make sure that we end the skirt soon enough that the baseboard can butt into the side of it and not be taller than the upward face right here. They look really funny when your baseboard has to kind of notch over the top of it. It makes a weird angle. Now with the lines all snapped and in place, we've taken a measurement from this point here all the way down to that point there that we identified. We've got 136 1/4 inches. Now we measure down right here. That's measuring 7 1/8, and you want to keep your baseboards up off of the floor by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So we're going to just say we're going to go down 6 7/8 from that point. That'll leave it a little above the landing so that the baseboard can then run out over the top of it. So I'm gonna write that number down, 6 7/8 inch. Down here on this other end, gonna measure down here, and it looks like we're coming up with 9 1/2. There again, we want it to be up off the floor, so we're gonna say 9 1/4 inches. I just like to write my measurements down so I'm not trying to remember everything. Here's the MDF skirt board we're going to be using. Our first exercise was to figure out the angle of the stairs. I can see over there it's 37.5 inches. The 37.5. Put that out with your speed square, make a line. And then I just need a little piece of scrap that I'll use to extend this line all the way down. Then what we did is we said, it is going down 9 1/4. So we're gonna measure down 9 1/4. And then it just hits the floor, so then you're going to just run back 90 degrees off of that point. This is the piece we're going to remove. Now we're going to hold our tape measure on that point on the top. We're gonna measure up the 136 1/4 inches. And once again, use our 37.5 inch. Extend that line, X on each side. Now right there's the skirt. So I just had to question everything I knew because we accidentally put the skirt board in upside down. So when you bring it over, make sure you put it in the right side up, and then you won't go, oh boy, I think I've screwed everything up. So then what you do is you take it down to your line. What I like to do is dry fit it after I've cut it. That looks good. Looks good down there. So then we're gonna take it back out, router it, sand it, and we'll come nail it in. All right, when we were dry fitting the skirt board, you noticed on the bottom it was kind of held up. A lot of times the framers will take the plate that holds the stairs up and they'll run it tight to the wall. When they do that, you've got to cut a notch in the skirt board to accommodate for that. So I'm gonna measure over from the line that we created here. I'm getting 8 inches. I've got 3/4 inch of play. I don't want to fight it, so I'm going to say, hey, at 7.5 inches, I'm going to create a notch in our skirt. Now at that exact location right there, I'm going to measure over my 7.5 inches. It's a 2x4, so I'm going to come up. A 2x4 would measure 1.5 inches. I'm going to take it up a little higher because it doesn't matter, all the way up to 2 inches. And I'm gonna just create this notch right there. Doesn't need to be a very pretty cut, just get the material out of the way. Now we've got the skirt board in place. Gonna pull it up to its mark. Keep grabbing for my hammer that's not there. I'll tap it down into place with my hand because I don't have a hammer. Tap it to its line. Put a couple nails in. Now what I do is come down to the bottom. And I'm going to take a chisel or something, lift it up to the line, and tag it. Now that that's in place on the line, I'll just nail it in. Typically on a set of stairs, when you frame your stringers, you'll fur them away from the wall 1.5 inches. Like you saw on the right side, we were able to slide the skirt board right down between the stair system and the wall. There was a gap. On this side, because this wall was framed on top of the stairs, there's not a gap. So this is going to take a little bit more calculating and cutting to be able to put a skirt board in. Basically, we're gonna have to cut the shape of the stair into the bottom edge of the skirt board. To do this side, it's going to be identical as the other side. We've got a top measurement from where we want the skirt board to begin and where we want it to end. I've just picked an arbitrary point. I'm trying to get it far enough back off of the edge of the corner bead that I can put a piece of baseboard and an angled piece and then another piece of baseboard. So if I get it right on the edge, it's gonna be hard to make look pretty. So I'm like, this is just experience, just back it up a little bit. Then the other piece of information we need to do this is I've measured, and I know that the rise of the stair is 7 7/8, and the run of the stair is 10 inches. So those are the measurements we're going to use to create the cutout of the stair in the bottom of the skirt. Gonna slide it in there. You can see I'm slightly above my line here and here, but this skirt board is parallel to that line. That's nice and plumb, so I'm not gonna be overly concerned about being up 1/4 inch. If you were, you could go in and you could cut these down a little bit more to drop it. It's just really not that critical. What I've done is laid out the skirt on this side, cut it, done a dry fit. Now over here on this other side, you can see that the wall ends before the stair. The easiest thing to do is, we already know that this is going to be the same, the two sides. So what I do is just cut 2 of them, and then we're going to just take the longer one, just lay it in. And then what I'm gonna do is just select a point. I want these to end right as that corner bead rounds. I just select my point. So then I'm gonna just make another one and utilize the exact same angles, but without remeasuring it. It's just a lot quicker. We are now going to prep the edge of the stair for the skirt. the tread caps and the risers. To do that, you have to cut the nose off and you have to cut the overhang off, depending on your stair system. Sometimes the framers will hang these long so that you can wrap carpet around them. But in a wood scenario, we want them cut off. Whenever you're cutting anything off, you're better off to have it cut further in than hanging out. Because if it hangs out, it's gonna block or protrude your skirt from sitting tight. If it's in a little bit, it's not gonna make any difference. These are 8-inch tread caps we're putting on. What you wanna do is calculate the width of the skirt, which is 3/4, and then the 8-inch tread cap, which would put me a point right there. And then it's nice to have a 1/2-inch gap between the end of the tread cap and the actual stair riser where they're gonna wrap the carpet. So I add an additional 1/2 inch so that you can see I've got this line right here. Then I measure the overhang on these stairs. The nose is 1.5 inches. So I'm gonna come about maybe 1 5/8 inches. So like I said, it's better to be further in than hanging out. And I'm going to make my lines across all the noses. The overhang here is 1 inch, so I'm about 1 1/8 inches. Make a line. Once we get all the lines in place, we'll cut it out. I had snapped this line, but it's really hard to get an accurate line because we've got all these noses all cut up. They're not straight. So you can try to set a line that's about 12 inches off, but that's not the way I'm going to show you how to do it. We know the slope, it's our 37.5. So I'm going to just throw my tape measure across all the noses, and I have plenty of room in this particular set of stairs to run up here. So I'm going to just cut a piece that's 10 feet long, okay, with that angle on it, and then we'll adjust it exact to 37.5 degrees. All right, if you take a look at these treads, I've cut them all the way back. They're cut back further than the riser. That is perfect. If you've got any portion of that hanging over, you're just going to create a mess for yourself. Everybody always tries to cut everything exact and perfect. They waste a lot of time and effort, and it's just silly. Some things are just better to be shorter and just out of the way. This is one scenario where it definitely is. Right here, I don't care if I beat up the drywall a little, it's all gonna be covered by this skirt board. Get that tread back out of the way. Cut that riser, get it back out of the way. You don't want any protrusions. When you're mitering the skirt board, it's better to have this skirt approximately 1 inch above the corner of where the tread cap or the riser and the tread meet. So once I've got that established, just generally by eye, and I'm sitting tight on the floor, what I'm going to do is pull out my speed square and my torpedo, and we're gonna go back to that original exercise that we did when we determined that the stairs were a 37.5 degree angle. It is exactly 37.5, and I'm just gonna pin it. Now that that's pinned in place, we're on the back side of the skirt. We're going to trace the stairs. What happens with these stairs is sometimes the framer didn't cut them exact, or the pine riser will curl, or they'll buckle. So what we're doing is just tracing kind of what we have. Some of them aren't straight up and down, but what you don't want to do is build your beautiful set of stairs and then have somebody sit over there on the couch and look and go like, whoa, why is one tilted that way and one tilted that way? My old boss, when he taught me how to do it, he would trace them and then he would adjust his blade for every single stair. And I used to do it that way until I stood back on the couch and I'm like, well, what the heck did I do it like that for? Our 37.5 is our magical number. We're gonna cut every stair at that regardless of what each individual stair might be telling us. This top one, we want this to extend out a little bit. And so what I'm doing is picking the height that matches this tread. And then I'm gonna draw a nice level line. And then on the skirt, they look a little better if rather than just ending right here, if you kind of carry them around the corner a little bit. So we're gonna pick a point. Here again, it's an arbitrary point that's just kind of based off of experience that looks good. And then we're gonna do a nice plumb cut. So I'm just gonna use my torpedo, just get a really nice plumb cut right here. And then the last thing we're gonna do before we remove this is we're going to come on the bottom side of this skirt, and we're just gonna draw a good pencil line right here that's gonna tell us exactly where to replace that when we're done cutting it. One other thing before we remove this, as I get confused, I get over there and I see all these lines. I'm like, which one's the rise, which one's the run? So what I do, come back here, Matt, is I like to make a few notes to myself, okay? This one right here, we can call it the run, rise, run, rise. And then I like to go, I want my skirt to miter out this direction, so I make a few marks like this just to tell myself. Otherwise you get over there and you sit there for the next 5 minutes trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. Over here at the saw, we're going to now set our saw to our 37. Come over here, Matt, so you can actually see it right there. We're gonna set it to the 37.5 degrees and lock it in. Then we're going to tilt our blade a full 45 degrees and lock it in. Now we're going to place our skirt board up onto the saw. I won't say anything mean about DeWalt tools because some guys just really take a lot of offense. Overall, I like them, but they could use a little work. On the back side, remember we made a couple reference marks to save ourselves working our brains too hard. That's telling us I want to miter this back 90 degrees this way, which is the same direction I've got the blade tilted. So we're set. And see this one right here, how it's lining up here at the bottom, and then it's leaving the line up here by almost 1/4 inch. If I miter a 3/4 inch piece of material, that means it's going to accommodate on the face a 3/4 inch piece of material. What I don't want to do is cut back too far. So I don't want to take the closest point and then go down, because what I'm going to have happen is then I'm not going to be able to get the riser back because the tread riser on the stair is going to be in my way. So you want to pick the point that is the furthest out and use that as your point where you make your miter off of. And then you got to make sure it's good and flat. I've cut them one time and I had it up like this, and you cut it and then all your angles are off. You've got to make sure you're totally flat. Now look at this one. This one actually is pretty good. Its furthest out point is up at the top. So we're going to put it just on the inside of the line up on the top, make sure it's tight. And then when you cut, you overcut through past the line that represents your tread by 3/4 inch. We've got all the 45-degree angles cut. The next phase is cut this piece out. This line right here represents the tread on the stair. We want our tread caps to sit on top of and come over the top of the skirt. So this is also another area where it's better that it be a little bit lower versus higher. So what I'm going to do is cut, rather than cut on this side of the line, I'm going to cut them all on this side of the line to make sure that they're down just slightly. And there again, this one had to be a beautiful, pretty cut. That's why we did it on the miter saw. This one right here is just kind of a rough hand saw cut to trim it off, because you're gonna see quickly that the tread caps are going to cover this entire edge. What we've now done is just placed the cut skirt board against the side of the stairs. What I'm analyzing is I'm making sure that this riser right here doesn't come out too far beyond, because remember I've got a half inch thick piece of material that I'm mitering into a 3/4 inch skirt. So basically, if I projected this line all the way through, I'm making sure I've still got a half inch of meat to bite into on each one. And as I'm looking at them, we've done very well. If you're not quite there, you can always slide this either one way or the other to make sure that you're on. So looking at them all, they're all going to work. Unfortunately, if you mess one of them up, I guess you can deal with the mess up, or you have to recut the entire thing. So this part's pretty critical. This particular stair system, this is just MDF, so it's relatively inexpensive. We've done stairs that this is a piece of hardwood, and that's a really ouchy mistake. Right now, Matt is sanding. This is what makes a good carpentry job stand out. If you don't take the time to sand and you leave all the chatter from the saws in your wood and you just throw it up, the painters aren't going to come through and sand it out and feather it and make it look good. They're just going to leave it, and you're going to see all that chattering right through the paint. So as you can see, Matt's really taking his time feathering out that chatter. Depending on the mill it came from, sometimes it's a lot worse. This particular stuff, see on the edge how rough it is? We just like to sand that out, make it look good. Honestly, your painter really is only going to be as good as your carpenter. All right, this all looks good. I pinned one nail on the top, but as I'm looking at this bottom stair, you can see right here, come around this edge right here, you can see that this is hanging out a quarter beyond this. So that means this space out here is 3/4. That's an entire inch out. If I've got a 1/2 inch piece of material I'm mitering into there, I'm gonna have a whole entire 1/2 inch gap behind there. All the other ones look good. So that tells me that I probably should recut this one. Now that we've recut and corrected that issue, that looks good. They all look good. They're all gonna work. Now we're going to nail the skirt board on. Whenever you have a 90-degree corner, if you cut both of your pieces coming together at 45 degrees, sometimes they'll touch in the back and they'll be slightly open at the front. The skirt boards we mitered at 45 degrees. What we're going to do on these risers is we're gonna miter them at, I'm gonna say like 46.5 degrees. Because in carpentry, you can't ever see the back edge. So if there were any gap, that's where you want it. You don't want it at the front. So if you want a tight, clean look, you'll always overcut your angle slightly. So what we're gonna have to do on our saw is most of them will do it, but you just have to override it. So this one has a hard lock at 45, but I open this up and I'm going to allow it to go beyond. I'm gonna go down to 46.5 degrees and lock it into place. Here's my risers. These particular risers are, looks like poplar on one side and alder on the other. So you gotta make sure you're mitering them the right way, otherwise you're gonna have a 1/2 stairwell. And maybe that's what you want, but I'm sure these owners are gonna want everything to be alder. So be mindful of that. Most of them are that way. And we're going to set it at the corner because this particular mill doesn't leave any excess. They've given us exactly 8 inches to work with, so that means I gotta miter it right off of the corner. We cut them like that at 46.5 degrees. So I'll work through these. Run a bead of glue. Whenever you have a hardwood, you want to be very careful not to get glue on it. If you get anywhere you get glue on your finger and touch it and smudge it, then when the painters go to stain it, it won't take the stain. So if you get glue, you have to thoroughly sand it out. So you just got to be so careful when gluing. Now these risers right here, in this stair system, there's a piece of bullnose that's going to cover this. So we're better, once again, this was better to be a little bit shorter. This was better to be a little bit lower. Same thing on the riser. If we get it too low, you're going to obviously see a big gap, but we have quite a bit of leeway. So what we don't want to do is have this hanging up here and then have the whole tread cap rocking on it. Better to be a little bit low. We want to lower this enough that the carpet or whatever flooring you're doing is going to cover it. And when I have that bead of glue, what I'm going to do is not wipe it forward. I'm going to wipe it to the side. So in the last little segment, I just told you don't get glue on it. And I just did. I had glue all over my finger, and you can see I got it right here. So what it's doing is making a film. So what I need to do is sand it out. So you want a nice fine sandpaper, and you always sand with the grain. If you sand against the grain, you'll tear it up, and then you'll see all those scratches when they put the stain on. So sanding with the grain, I have to really work it until I get that all off. In this stair system, we have one newel post that's going to mount here at the bottom. What I like to do is take the tread cap, and this particular mill leaves this piece a little long, so I don't know what you'll be using, what you'll have to do, but these ones, I pop that piece off and get it out of my way. Now what we need to do is cut some of this material out so that it goes flush with the finished wood portion of it. And the other thing we need to do is make sure that we got to cut this tread cap this exact distance from the face of this riser to the face of this riser. So we're going to measure here. We have 10 and a 16th. So that means I'm going to come off of this point right here and come over 10 and 1/16 of an inch. I've got this tied against my fence on my saw. I've got my saw locked in at 90 degrees. Everybody's saw is different, so you're gonna have to figure out how this works on your saw. Everybody's skill level's a little different, so you just gotta figure out what works for you. But what I need to do is just cut this back at my 10 and a 16th, straight back, just even to that line and not going through. Okay, then for these, the best way I've found to miter them is turn them upside down, set your saw back at a 45-degree angle. What you need to do is project, come over here. You need to project this line, this inside edge of this line up, and then you need to project it all the way up to this point right here. What I've found is if you try to cut it right here, it's too close. Then you end up cutting through your tread. So what you need to do is space it off of your fence with a piece of material. Then when I cut this, I want to make sure that my edge of the blade is right even with that, and I'm cutting on the outside, not the inside. Now you can see I haven't gone far enough because I'm not touching yet. So I've got to do it. Once you do one or two of them, you kind of get a feel of where you got to go to. So if I've got it, there you go. Now I'm really close right there. Then what I do is just take a sharp razor knife. I can just finish cutting that little piece out. You're better off to stop sooner versus cut into here and then you have this little nasty hole you got to try to fill. I did make a mistake. I chipped that when I turned on the blade and it was touching it. So don't do that when you make your railing. Now what we're going to do is clean the top of this tread off. Any drywall compound, dirt, whatever. Blow it off so it's good and clean. And we're going to glue this entire bottom edge, and then we're going to place the tread cap right into it. Now see this, how this kind of moves? That's perfect. We want it to slide all the way to where it's touching tight right here. And then that pushes that back into its location. As you can see, I've cut this off and I'm perfectly flush here. If anything, if I had to be a 16th one way or the other, I'd rather be a 16th out on this one versus a 16th in. Make sure it's tight right here, that the nosing is tight to the skirt so it's not sitting on there like this. You want to make sure it's nice and tight. And then you're going to pin it on. Now I know I'm going to have a newel post right here and my balusters are going to be here. So what I don't want to do is go nailing right in the middle and then hit all the nails when I go to drill my balusters in. So make sure it's tight, and I'm going to select the outside edge. Put some pins in. Now if you look up here, if I'm shooting right here, I'm just going to be hitting a void. And if so kind of look at it. Okay, if I carry this line down, I want to hit about right there, so I'm going to hit right here. Make sure you're not shooting into nothing. And then when I come forward too, same token, if I get too far forward, I'm gonna be shooting in this void or blowing through this. So looks like I wanna keep back a good 1.5 inches, keep back 1.5 inches, and that's where I'll hit that wood. Now what we wanna do is shim this bottom riser. As you can see, it still moves. What I wanna do is shim it so it's perfectly in the same plane as this one. So right now you can see it's in too far. The reason for that being is because we cut those at 46.5 degrees. We want to pull that out, which is going to tighten our face, and then put it in the right plane. So get a little wood glue, put it on each side of your shim, and then slide it into there until you get to that perfect point. The reason I'm using the wood glue is because I'm not going to be putting big nails or screws to hold it. I'm just going to use this little micro pinner. Maybe a couple of those, so I don't want to be too carried away and nailing through the face of my pretty railing. Now we're going to find a right size shim for the bottom. Put the glue on it. Slide it in. It's snug, not pulling it out, not pushing it in, just at the perfect point. Put a couple pins in there. Now this next riser up, same thing. See how it moves? So what we want to do is tell it to stay tight to the back of this tread. We're going to do that by placing a shim in there. Now this gap right here, this is okay. And this is what I was trying to explain when I was cutting the skirt and positioning it, is this was a 3/4 inch miter, and so this is 1/2 inch material. So that means we're going to have roughly 1/4 inch behind that, which is what we've got. If we were too close this way, we wouldn't be able to get this riser to sit on there in a nice square fashion. And if we were too far out, like that one when I pointed out, we would have had this huge old gap. We want to keep it tight enough that when they put the carpet in, that it's going to cover the majority of that. You know, carpet's roughly 1/2 inch thick, and so it's going to cover that and come up here and be pretty flush with the face of that. Now we're going to measure and cut the rest of these risers. There's no need to pull the nose off, because we're not mounting a newel post in these, so we're just gonna leave them be. So what I'm gonna do is measure from front of riser to front of riser. That's 10 inches. On these, if you add about 1/16 of an inch, you'll be a little better. The only way you'd ever see that gap is if you were able to get your head down here and look up, which is pretty impossible. And so you're gonna be better if you had to choose on this scenario to be over or under, I'd always be over 1/16. So I'm going to call this one 10 1/16. And I'm just going to write it. This one right here, that one's 10. I'm measuring at 10 3/16. So I'm going to call it 10 1/4. Now we get the variance, the mild variance between these because probably in the first place, the framers didn't cut them exactly perfect. Maybe they didn't get the risers exactly tight. And so you get a little bit of variance. It doesn't matter. It's gonna all look professional if we just go with the measurement that we have on each one. All right, as I pointed out earlier, this mill has left this piece long. I don't even know quite why they do that, but what I do is set it at 90. I'm gonna come down and find my edge of my wood, and then don't do like I did earlier and start the blade in the material, lift it up above it, turn it on, trim that off even. With that, you can see, if I was too short, it would end right here, and then you're like, oh crap, what do I do with that gap? That's why you don't want to cut it too short. You want it long enough that when you slide it in tight, it pins right there. And then remember, we move this over. I can feel right here, I've got probably 1/16 of an inch. That's 1/16 of an inch longer than we made it. All right, this top one's expert mode, because now we get to try to cut this shape in there and that, and we've got this skirt to deal with. We've got a lot of things going on here. So this gets to be a little exciting. So we're going to measure the face right here. We've got 1 1/8 inches. So off of my line, I'm gonna come up with the 1 1/8 inches. So you just carefully take all of your measurements. We know that our skirt right here on the outside is 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna make that line Then we know that this is round. And I've done this a few times, so I just kind of round it out with my pencil. It's about a 3/4 inch radius. Then over here, we picked that arbitrary length for that skirt board. We're gonna measure that. I'm 3 9/16. We're gonna go 3 5/8. So remember, it's a little easier if it hangs over. I'm just burning 3, 1, 2, 3, 5/8. That's where we're going to end that. Now what we're going to do is figure out, coming off of that edge of the skirt, how far to go over. I'm looking at 5.5 inches. Right here, I'm gonna burn 1 inch and add it on, so 6.5. The reason we burn 1 inch off of a line is these clips they move, depending whether you're pushing or pulling against something, and they're just hard to tell. So when you're doing finish carpentry, I always just burn 1 inch and add 1 inch, or burn 2 inches, add 2 inches, whatever you want to do, whatever makes you happy. So you got those lines. Now what we'll probably do is take our multi-tool and we'll cut this up, and that way we don't have to try to keep making all these additional cuts. I think we're going to lose accuracy. So what we'll do is we'll take a piece of material that's this size, make a line. It's going to be the thickness of what we got going on. And then we'll just use our cookie saw and cut that in. I've made the big cuts with the miter saw, but now we have these rounded areas. There's no way to get a saw in there. We could try to use a jigsaw, but I don't know if we have a really fine bit. And so this, for me, becomes a perfect opportunity to use the coping saw, because you can adjust it to where it cuts on the downstroke. So rather than pulling up and tearing your material up, it's going to cut when it pushes down. And then you can adjust it to where it'll snake around your material as you work. And then I'll be able to cut this little area that I couldn't get the saw in. It goes straight. Maybe. There we go. And then, like we talked about in the past, we clean up that cut right there. Sharp utility knife. All right, we fit this in here. I've still got about a tiny bit of a gap, and so I think I could clean these up to get that a little tighter. Could probably come in here and clean each of these up. Sometimes you're tempted to take your multi-tool and throw it on the corner bead, but they vibrate so much that they'll tear the corner bead all the way up, and you'll crack it and you'll make a big mess. And so I always avoid that temptation and just try to cut around them. We're now going to mount the newel post, so we need to determine where we're going to place it down here. You know, is it more this way? Is it dead center? Is it over there? Well, we're going to mount the rosette and the railing into that wall. So what we want to do is come up here and measure the width of this wall. It's 4 3/4, so half of that is 2 3/8. So I'm going to make a mark. It tells me it's 2 3/8. Then I'm going to pull over from the tread cap and see what measurement I come up with, which is 4 15/16. Then I'm going to transfer that measurement down here, 4 15/16. And to mount the newel post, we're gonna mount it on a piece of 2x4, which is 3.5 inches. So half of 3.5 is 1 3/4 inches. So at 1 3/4 inches, we're gonna make a little mark. So that there becomes the edge of the 2x4. So we're going to screw that on right there. What we're gonna do is put some wood glue behind it so that it gets glued on there tight. Nice healthy bit under the back of that. And we're going to put a screw right in the top. So that's the point we're trying to align to. And we'll take our torpedo. We'll plumb it up. Once it's nice and plumb, we're going to put the screw in the bottom. We need to figure out the girth of the railing. It is 2 inches. Cut off straight. Cut on a 37-degree angle, it's probably 2.5 inches, would be my guess. So come over here. We want the railing to land approximately center in this area on the newel post. So that's 6 inches, 3. So about 1 1/4 inches above is where we want that railing to end. Okay? So a railing, the max height above the nose of the stairs is 38 inches, and the minimum height is, well, this is also a guardrail, so it's going to be 36 inches is where the railing is going to be. We got to be 36 inches or greater to give fall protection off the side of the stair system. So we're going to lay our the level across the nose of the stairs to see the plane. This box newel is 5.5 inches. And as you can see right here on the end, it's hollow. So we're going to slide this newel over this piece of 2x4 that we've mounted. The sides are 3/4 inch. So it means the closest we're going to be able to get it is 3/4 inch off of this. I like to leave a little bit of a gap. So let's say 1 inch. So this is a 5-inch newel. We have a 1-inch gap. That means the back of the newel post is going to be right here at 5 inches. So I'm going to make a mark. Then I'm going to take my speed square that's not in my pouch, but I'm going to find it right here. Okay. We're going to set that on the stair, and then we're going to see where the plane and that point meet and measure that. That is 2 5/8 inch. So what we're going to do now is take the top of the railing, which I already said it has to be 36 inches. We're going to go 36 inches plus this distance from plane to get down to the tread, which was 2 5/8. And that is where we're going to notch the newel post. Then we're going to find out, to get to the ground, what that distance is, which is going to be the rod. Okay, this is 8 inches. So we're going to add it's okay if it's up a tiny bit. I'm going to go 8 3/8. So that's where we're going to cut that off. Now we have to determine how far we're going to notch it. So I said it was going to be 1 inch. So at 1 inch, it's going to be about 2.5 inches is how deep we're going to notch it in. This one, there's a skirt that goes over all of it. that covers it. So these cuts don't have to be super clean. Or precise. I can overcut it a little. It's not going to matter. So I make that cut with the saw, and then the other one I'm gonna use the trim saw. I promised I wasn't gonna say bad things about DeWalt, but I've owned the saw twice. The last one fell off the roof and I was kind of bummed, but then I was excited because it was a little beat up, and I thought, oh, this will be good because the engineers at DeWalt most certainly have figured out this issue where there's no way to adjust this. And when it's tight, you can tighten it in these positions, but if you want to cut it full depth, it hits that. And you can't turn it tight and then move it up the other way. So I was so excited. I thought, oh, they for sure figured it out, but they did. Now, what we want to do is, before we get too carried away then, is we'll take our level again, draw a line so we can see the plane. And then we had our 6-inch, it was 1.25 inches. So now we're gonna measure off top of railing down, make sure we're 36 inches, which, yes we are. Okay, so I've got some glue on this 2x4. I'm just gonna slide this down and into place. And I'm gonna start by I just kind of pick a location and throw a screw to get it started. Then from there, we're going to begin to fine tune this. You can see that move. Did you see that? A little too much. So what I'm gonna do is back it out a little bit. I'm gonna put one lower, try to hold it, and we're gonna call that good. Then what I like to do, put my speed square in here and make sure that this newel post is totally square with the risers going up. It's a tiny bit off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a screw right here and drive it that way ever so slightly. Put a little shim under there. We'll suck it down. On a box newel, you assemble the box newel and then there's a skirt that goes around the base of it. That covers your screws, it covers your overcut and any imperfections that you have. So you can select any height for these. So generically they come, I don't know, what's that look like, about 21 inches, this particular one. So I think that's probably too high proportionally. So I think we'll cut it down. Visually, I think it's gonna look good about right there. So we're just gonna cut that off. Now we start there at the face, and then we do the notched pieces next. So take your speed square, nice and square, and run it across there. And then we're gonna custom notch that piece in. Sometimes when you cut, you get a little bit of a burr. So before you put the piece in, it always looks better if you'll take and kind of get that burr out. Give it a minor round over. It's really hard without scratching that lower piece all up to do it after the fact. So if you do it up front, it'll look much nicer. Notice I keep the bead of glue back. You put it right here at the edge, you're gonna ooze it all out, all over the face and have a mess. If we keep it back, we'll minimize to a certain degree the amount of glue that we get out there. You can see the blade is about 1/8 of an inch thick. This line right here represents the exact length that I would like this cut at. So if I cut on the lower side of the line, I'm gonna end up being almost 1/8 of an inch too short. So you always have to be mindful of which side of the line to cut on. So if you put an X, you'll always know that, hey, I'm trimming all my material and cutting it on that side of the line. Right here, you can see this is the little piece we're moving. I've got X's here. So I'm gonna cut on this side of the line, and then here I'm gonna cut on this side of the line. I had to create a little notch because that was conflicting and it was holding it up. So, I mean, you just have to be vigilant with your individual project. can see that little notch I created to be able to get it in tight. Final piece I'm going to measure. I'm coming up with 7 inches on each side. Where that one's just a straight cut, I'm just going to take the piece over and cut it. So what they've done, the mill, you notice how theirs is touching right here at the face, and there's a gap in the back. They're doing that trick that I had showed you guys earlier when we were mitering the skirt boards, because then on the outside, the visual part is going to be nice and tight, and always let the gap be at the back. Okay, now you can see I cut it a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is I still have another piece. I'm going to cut it just a little bit longer. You know, that's the great thing about social media is most people just kind of put out what they want other people to see, so they can hide all their mistakes. They can take care of everything off camera. We have been pretty true and honest with you here. But if I was totally honest, I actually cut this for a 3rd time because it ended up being a little long. Now I'm going to take the level, throw it on the stairs, and carry the plane through the stairs up onto this wall and make a mark. Okay, that point right there is in plane with the nose. Now we're going to measure up our 36 inches from that point. 36 inches. Voila. So that there. And then we'll do the same thing down here. I carried the plane over. I'm going to measure up 36 inches as well. Make a mark right there. Carry it through right there. So now we're going to just take our measurement from that point to that point up there and get a railing length. Here's our piece of railing. We still have our magical number, and in case you've forgotten, we have it written on the wall over there. It's our 37.5 degrees. We're going to tilt our saw. That's why that number is so critical, because you use it all the way through the entire stair system. There's 35, 36, 37.5 degrees. Lock it in. And we make our cut. Initially, what I like to do is just cut the railing without deducting for the rosette, just to make sure my angles are on, that I don't have something that's glaringly twisted or off. So I'm looking at this, I'm touching here, I'm nice and tight there. I'm a little tiny bit opened up here on the bottom. So when I recut that, I might make my angle a little bit more. So maybe I'll go up to maybe almost 38 degrees. And then I'm gonna come up here on the other side and just test the same thing. And you wanna hold that there, Matt? And that one's pretty good, but the wall actually kind of twists in here a little bit, so it's tight on this side and away. So I'm gonna make myself a little mark to let me know that I'm gonna take a little bit off of that side. So now what I'm gonna do is put the rosette in place and make its mark, and we'll deduct the width of the rosette and make those changes. So I believe that this tilts probably almost a half a degree. So we're gonna just move that half a degree, lock it in for when we recut this and take that 3/4 of an inch. When you go through the wood, you wanna go nice and slow and let your blade get up to speed, and it'll minimize as it comes through the backside where it chips the wood. I probably didn't let it get going quite fast enough. So the idea is to go nice and slow, smooth at a full RPM blade. We just held it up and checked the angles. We're still open here and tight here, so we're going to continue to rotate this, almost another 3/4 of a degree, and just take another little tiny sliver off of it. Before we nail these on, it's the same thing. It's easier to kind of lightly feather these edges and clean up these burrs and stuff beforehand. That way you're not digging into the side of the newel post or into the rosette. And this one where I kind of chipped that a little bit, if I'm trying to sand and bump into the rosette, I'll never be able to get it. But right now, where I've got it free and open, I can clean that up. Always being mindful of the grain of the wood. And now we're going to attach the rosette. I always like to put a little glue on it. Be mindful to keep it back. Center it. Then throw little pins. And we can continue to adjust it as needed. Once you have it sitting on there square, put a couple large nails in. And then to finish it off, I'll put a screw in because that'll be, in the long run, a lot more durable. Now with that attached, we're able to bring this over and put it into place. So what I'm gonna do is just throw in a little micro pinner to hold it up. And then once that's in place, we're gonna go and measure and mark all of the balusters. What we're going to do is lay out the balusters. There's certain codes that govern how far they can be spaced. What you don't want to have happen is a small child's head to become impinged between them. So the way the code reads is it says the maximum sphere, a 4-inch sphere is the maximum sphere that you could ever be able to place between the balusters. So you need to be mindful of the areas on these type where they kind of go fatter and narrower. You want to make sure that you're not leaving any area that becomes larger than 4 inches. These are bigger balusters, and so we're going to end up with 2 per stair. When you use the 1 1/4 balusters or 1-inch balusters, or they even have 5/8 inch balusters, you'll probably end up having 3 per stair to meet code. Laying out this top baluster right here is the same as all the other ones. I'm really close. I'm at 4 1/16, then I go 4 and a little bit. I am pretty close, but I'm probably 1/4 inch off. So what I'm gonna do is just cheat this line back 1/4 inch on this particular one, just to make sure we still comply with code. The naked eye just cannot see that small of a variance, but an inspector with a tape measure could for sure find it. So once we've got all the treads laid out, take a good accurate level, come down here, Matt, and we put it on the mark on the tread, and then we're just gonna plumb it up perfectly. And then once it's nice and plumb, just make a little mark on the railing, and then I'll move up to the next one and do the same thing again. Line it right up, plumb it up, and make a mark. And we'll just kind of work our way all the way up the entire railing in this fashion. So if you put the railing parallel to the plane of the stairs, all your balusters are going to be the same length. Sometimes you screw it up and it's a little off. It's probably not the end of the world. You just have to cut the balusters separately, but today we did things right. So our long baluster is going to be 38 3/4, and our short baluster is going to be 35 1/4. I'm going to write that down: 35 1/4 and 38 3/4. What we need to do is, now that's just right there. That would leave that outside corner exposed. So we need to drill that up into there, probably a good inch. So we're gonna add 1 inch to those measurements I've written down. So we're gonna actually make the balusters 36 1/4 and 39 3/4 of an inch to allow that to go in. Now when you cut these balusters, they have 42-inch ones and they've got 36. You don't want to cut off of the top because then you're going to have these gaps changing. Like this would be a long one and then be short and then go long again. You always cut off of the bottom of the baluster and that keeps everything in the exact same plane. You know, bless the hearts of our suppliers, they sent us the wrong balusters, so we're short one, long one. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to extend this one because I've got multiple short ones. So we cut it off nice and clean. And then I've located dead center. The way you do that is you take a speed square, and if you line it exactly over the corner, you can make a mark, then turn it 90 degrees, do the exact same thing, and that'll give you dead center. And we'll drill down through it. It's really hard to get it super exact, so we're gonna have to see if this works or not. This right here is, these are dowels. They're double-sided, so one side screws into the baluster, then the other side screws into the tread. And there's a special tool that screws over them that you're able to put into a drill and drive them. If you don't have this special tool, you can always just use a pair of channel locks or extras, but having the tool is super helpful. And you just put it in reverse and it'll pull it right out. So we're gonna try to screw these two together and hopefully we've hit the holes close enough to center. This one's not looking that promising. I guess we can try another trick is you can take a smaller bit, it's gonna be more accurate, and put it in first. Then after you have that hole, you can switch back out to the bit that you're intending to use. That hole is gonna create enough of a pocket that it's gonna follow it. Yeah, that looks much better there. We'll glue this up and tighten them together and see what we get. This is going to be okay. We're gonna sand this out nice. You can see this one planed out really good. This one's off, oh, ever so slightly, maybe a 32nd of an inch. We're gonna plane that out with a sander. This banister, these are going to be painted white, and so once that's glued, dried, spackled, you won't ever be able to see it. If it was going to be stained wood, it'd be kind of obvious because the graining's a little different. But with the paint, we're good to go. Okay, we just had those two little micro pinners holding this up, so now I'm gonna hold the railing and just bop it, and it'll all come down. Now, we're gonna flip this around, like so, and we're going to set it on the railing, like this. Then we have all the little marks that we made. I'm gonna use my speed square and square through them. After you've squared through them, you need to find dead center. So it's 1 3/4 inches. That's 7/8. 7/8. We are going to drill. The reason I set it upside down on the stairs is if you drill them in straight, you're not gonna have the angle. So really we're trying to drill these at a 37.5 degree angle. The way we're gonna do that is just by drilling straight down. Well, this is already on the correct angle. Then we're gonna end up with the right hole. You start, if you start your bit perpendicular to your material until you get it to bite. Then after you get it to bite, while it's spinning, you're gonna go up to the plumb position and then go straight down in. Now what you don't want to do is drill so far that you poke out the top of the railing. I've never done that in my life. So once you kind of work on that, then you just make sure your baluster, you know, that fits in there, which is perfect. It's going straight up. That means we did a good job. You can take a piece of tape and wrap it around your drill bit to give yourself a guide so that you know when it hits that certain point that it's in far enough. Basically, once I've buried that bit right there, that's where we need to be. All the holes are drilled. Now we're going to use the dowel fastener tool and just apply these dowels into the stair treads like so. It's super fast, super easy. Now this railing right here, this is a wood baluster railing. Most railings we do now are metal balusters. With the metal baluster railing, they're nice because you can actually put the railing totally in place, all installed, drill it all out, and you can put the balusters in after paint. But in wood, they have to go in first if you're going to use these dowel fasteners. These are really the only way to go though, because they keep that baluster tight and in place without having it slide around. Once we find the center, we're going to drill through the baluster, and then we're going to screw these on to the dowels that we've pre-placed into the stairs. Being mindful of placing the tall baluster at the back of the step and the short one at the front. After all the balusters are in place, you gently place the handrail on top of all of the balusters, and then we're going to fasten the railing to the newel post by screwing through this area right here. The reason we left the top of the newel post off is so we could securely fasten the railing to the new newel post by screwing through like this. We then apply a generous bead of glue to the top of the newel post and gently place the cap in place, being mindful to keep the glue on the back edge so that it doesn't ooze out and create an issue with staining. And then we gently fasten it with our 23 gauge pinner. To finish this project, we're going to cut the handrails that go on the walls. You have to miter them so they return into the wall. They look nicer if you do a 22-degree cut with a 45-degree piece, so you can return it gently into the wall. You apply a generous bead of glue, spread it all around so it gets good adhesion. Tap it a few times, make sure it's good, and it'll almost just stick there and hold itself up after you've got the right amount of glue. Then you'll use your 23 gauge pinner, pin it into place. Then we're going to change guns and blind nail through to hold the return on firmly without having a lot of holes that the painters have to deal with. And that there is a handrail. And here is a job well done, a beautiful banister. I don't know, looking at this, I'd have to say, seriously, not bad. Oh, I guess we should do an intro. We gotta have an intro.